welcome to another incubation talk. Today the topic is user acquisition and we are talking to Richard Kos from Chartboost. Richard, thank you for joining us. Could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Where to start? Just a little bit of background. I started studying game design at the Media College here in Amsterdam. I did an internship at Little Chicken Game Studio as a 3D modeler. During that internship, I thought, well, I want to be a little bit more on the business side. So I started studying at the School of the Arts, Art and Economics. And basically the day before I got my diploma, I got hired at Chartboost. And I just wanted to work with the smaller indie devs like you guys on user acquisition, but also monetization. And I'm with Chartboost now 2.5 years. And yeah, still loving it. Working with some of the key players in the European game industry, such as InnoGames, Septolab, and a whole bunch of others. And just helping them to achieve their UA goals.
And what is your role right now at Chartboost?
Account manager demand. So I only focus on advertising right now, no longer the monetization part, which I did before. Yeah, basically only user acquisition.
Well, let's get into the topic. First, obvious question, what is user acquisition?
User acquisition is basically acquiring new users. For us, it's only on mobile games. User acquisition is either acquiring them organically or non-organically. We are focusing on the paid user acquisition. So by showing advertisements, in our case at mobile games, of course. If you look at Chartboost, a small side note is that we are a network, which is different than a DSP or affiliate and that kind of stuff. And basically, it's that we can also show the ads in the mobile game. So we also have our own supply.
Your own supply of ads?
The ads are more the demand side, but we also have inventory where we can show the ads. So they have our SDK integrated, and that way they can also monetize with us.
Ah, okay. You said in the beginning I wanted to work with smaller companies, yeah. And now you're also working with some bigger companies. Yeah. How does that change the way you work? So working with a small company and working with a bigger company.
Yeah. Working with the bigger companies, I've become less consulting. They already know what they want, while the smaller ones are still figuring out how can we do a soft launch, what are the KPIs that we need to look at, what are the best practices on creatives. And then for the big guys, they have the budget. So they don't care as much as the smaller ones, but they just want to have certain results at a large scale. So they need to get proper traction in our network, basically demanding, let's say, 1,000 installs a day. Mm-hmm. While the small ones, yeah, well, they are basically happy with the crumbs that we can offer them.
There are still crumbs to offer? I mean, the smaller companies still have a chance?
Yeah. The smaller ones basically start with Facebook and Google because they have a huge source of supply. On our network, it's very competitive. So the CPIs are increasing year over year, and it's becoming harder to acquire quality users. But there is still room. Yeah, you can still set up a campaign. You can still get some proper traction, but not at the scale that the big guys get.
You're already mentioning a couple of important terms in your industry, CPIs, KPIs. Yeah. Could you just talk about those for a little bit? What are the basic terms that you need to understand about user acquisition?
So on the terminology side, let's start with the bidding. If you talk about CPI, that's basically the cost per install. So what will you pay for one user? But next to that, you can also pay, for example, through CPM, CPC. CPM is the cost per mil. So what do you pay per 1,000 impressions? The CPC is the price per click, so you only get the click. but for the smaller guys in general, it's more important to buy on CPI because it's relatively safe. You know that you will get the install. Well, on CPM you can pay for 1,000 impressions, but maybe you don't get the install. Then on the KPI side, there are plenty of them. There are high-level KPIs and low-level KPIs. There are KPIs for your company, the game company itself, but also KPIs for the game, which can be certain events. They need to pass level 3, for example, in the game. They need to have the retention of day 7 or day 30. A practical example is, for example, Voodoo, a hyper-casual mobile game developer. They basically kill every game, every prototype of every game that has less than 40% of day 1 retention. So it's a very strong KPI. While they do the soft launch and they don't meet that KPI, then it's a no-go and we're going to focus on something else.
So how much time would they spend adjusting the game to try and get to that 40%? Is that like 2 months, 3 months, a soft launch period?
I think for a company as Voodoo, which is one of the biggest players, not that long. It's a short period where they have a MVP, a minimal viable product of the game. They test it, and if it's a failure, let's focus on something else.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's maybe different than a lot of smaller companies would generally do it.
Yeah.
Because they would focus more on this is my my 1 or 2 games. This is my baby. I want to increase my retention, increase my 7-day, keep increasing it until it's high enough.
Exactly. Yeah. What kind of changes need they make to the game design to avoid that the player churn on the day 1 or day 30?
But so if you look at the big guys like Voodoo, if you can't reach a certain threshold, better to quit.
They basically have their own formula for success, and if that's not being met, then let's focus on something else.
So for them, a formula of success would be 40% churn rate, if I'm correct?
40% day 1 retention.
Day 1 retention, sorry. What are other important thresholds in the industry, or is it different for every company or every game?
In this one, in this example, they are mainly focusing on ad monetization, while others, let's say a strategy title, is way more focused on in-app purchases. So they use completely different events to measure the success of the game.
When does a game company determine those events? Is that in the design period already, or after it's done?
I think those go hand in hand. Basically, you will implement certain events or KPIs in the game development process. Then they will test it through a soft launch and adjust afterwards, after the test phase and before the global launch.
Yes, let's talk about that for a minute. Soft launch and global launch. What do you consider soft launch? What does a general soft launch look like, and then a global launch?
I think the first most important part is to buy users relatively cheap in the soft launch, where you will focus on countries where the CPI is at a low price, let's say India, Indonesia, Philippines. That's where they often have the soft launch. Then they will tweak their game on the go. They will see what creatives on the UA side, which creatives work well, which creative actually result in an install. That's an important part.
What's a creative?
Oh, sorry. So they advertise, for example, through a banner underneath in the game, or a video, or a playable advertisement. There are many different ways of a creative. Then you also want that once the user clicked on the creative, he will be directed to the App Store, and then they actually need to install the game, which is also a tricky part. The reason for that is, how should I explain this properly, is basically once they clicked on the creative, you want the install, and that is the conversion. The conversion rate is, for a network like us, very important, because the traction that you will get in our network So the amount of impressions that you'll get is a combination of the CPI, the cost per install, and the conversion rate. Those two combined is basically the eCPM. It's the value, the effective cost per mil. So what are you basically paying on average per 1,000 impressions? And we are allocating the most traffic, the most impressions, towards the advertiser with the highest eCPM, because we know that our publishers, the ones that are showing the ad, are getting the most value of their impressions. Keeping the conversion as high as possible is also allowing you to keep the CPI as low as possible. And I think that's really important, because if the conversion is off, it's not a good conversion, you will need to compensate that with a CPI. Does that make sense?
Yes, if I can explain it in my own words, if you need to pay more for the same amount of impressions, you need to pay more for the same amount of installs.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So those creatives, who makes those?
The developer.
Yeah?
Yeah. We don't do it for them. It's something. What we've done before is creating playables for our top advertisers, which was due to technical limitations. We were not allowing their playables because they didn't met the technical specifications of having them on our network. So we created them for them, which was not a success. They know what is working best for them. They know on which gameplay elements they should focus on. And we thought we knew. We didn't. And we learned a lot. And basically, we now have the developer create their own playables.
So does that mean for a small developer to join your network, they need to create an X amount of playables and creatives?
Ideally, I would suggest videos.
Okay, videos work best?
It's a little bit depending on the type of game. In the Voodoo example, we see that playables work really well. But in, let's say, a strategy title or an action title, we see that videos work really well. And especially in our network, on rewarded video, so where the user is basically forced to watch the entire ad without the skip button or anything. So yeah, video work really well. If you look at static interstitial, which is basically just one image of basically a poster or something, then that can work as good as well, but more in the tier 3 countries. Let's say for a soft launch, it can work quite well.
Because you mentioned tier 3 countries now and soft launch in countries like India and the Philippines. Yes. Do you have to consider cultural differences? Soft launching in India and the Philippines versus global launching in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the creatives part, for example, my partners really localize their creatives. I think a good example that is one of the casino advertisers that I work with. They always use this pretty lady at the roulette table, and in a nice dress, and she looks beautiful. But then when they want to advertise in, let's say, an Asian country, this character is suddenly anime, basically an anime character that converts way better than the cute blonde girl, basically. In addition to that, I think it's also worth noting that if you have these different characters, you want to see similarities between the creative and the landing page, so the App Store page. So if that anime character suddenly results in this blonde girl, there's like this disconnection between the creative and the landing page, often resulting in a lower install rate.
Yeah, I understand. So let's talk a little bit more about the different types of games, because I noticed there's a lot of differences there as well. What are the most important differences in between genres? So let's say casino is totally different from strategy, and then hyper casual. What are the most important differences for you?
So if we take the casino and let's say the Voodoo example, they basically target completely different audiences. Where the casino one wants the paying users, often the 18 plus, well, they say housewives, but also males, which often result into a paying user. Where the Voodoo guys are focusing on, well, the underage people that are clicking on all the ads and often don't need to spend anything in the game itself. Which also means that if they want to, the casino guys, if they want to acquire users that are likely to pay more, they also come at a different price. Then we talk about the CPIs again. I think if you look at the CPI for a casino guy on iOS, it will roughly be around 10 euros, while Voodoo is buying them for, let's say, at least less than 50 cents.
Yeah, so that's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So something to take into account as a starting developer, maybe to focus on an area that is less crowded.
Yeah. That's a good assumption. Also, for the casino guys, they are focusing, for example, on the Middle East. If they have this rich guy from Qatar that is turning into a wheel for 2 million, it basically backs up the entire marketing budget for, let's say, the month of January. So yeah, that definitely makes sense.
And you talked about audience as well. Target audience, is that something that you as Chartboost take into account once you see the game, or is it something that developers already have to take into account for their user acquisitions while designing the game?
Yeah, the last one for sure. For me, my role is basically to identify the sources where we can find their target audience. So I do want to know who do you like to target and where can we find them. Often this is in similar type of apps. Let's say, once again, back to the Voodoo example, they would like to acquire the users from, let's say, Ketchup. Both are hyper-casual players. So they know that there's a good audience, they are familiar with the gameplay, and it's likely that they will interact with the ads as well. So yeah, you definitely want to buy the users from your competitors.
How do you handle competition within your own network?
Yeah, that is sometimes you will be able to convince them showing certain eCPM numbers or eCPM predictions, allowing you to convince them to actually onboard that demand from your competitor, because it will result in a high eCPM. But it's often a midway. It's also a little bit depending on how much they rely on ad monetization, because if ad monetization is only 10% of their total revenue, because the 90% is, let's say, coming from in-app purchases, then they say, well, we're not going to do this.
So again, like ad monetization, ads are different from in-app purchases. Can you work with games that do either one, or does it need to be both? How does that work?
They basically would like to focus on apps that show, so the advertisers basically want to focus on apps that have a lot of in-app purchases. Acquiring those users, which are likely players, will also likely spend in their app, the one that they are advertising for. So yeah, it's basically about the quality that you get, is what you're focusing on. Going back to the KPIs, what sources deliver the best, let's say, ROI or retention numbers.
High quality players.
Yes.
Something that you mentioned in the beginning, organic versus paid. Of course, Chartboost does paid. Is there any effect from organic? How does organic work?
It's not really my field of expertise, but the reason that a lot of companies are buying big volumes through paid acquisition is because they are having higher virality, better discoverability in the App Store, and those two will result in an organic uplift. So buying in big portions of whatever country, they will also immediately increase in the charts in that specific country.
That's because those apps will be more visible in the store?
Exactly, yeah. I think for my partners, they often come up to me and say, hey Richard, we really want to buy in, let's say, Germany, just to boost the chart in that specific country.
You mentioned your SDK that everybody probably has to implement. Are there other user acquisition plugins, social plugins that you can use as well? Or when you work with a company like Chartboost, it's just your SDK? Are there other options?
So this is basically the new chapter of Chartboost, where we are not buying only in our own supply, so only in the apps that have our SDK integrated, but I am now also buying externally. We have our bidder, which is basically competing in other supply sources as well. Then you need to think of AppLovin, through Google, basically, and that's basically the next step, is opening up your supply sources to other exchanges. And yeah, I don't want to be too in-depth, but
It's going to be very technical. Yes. Quickly.
Yeah, but yeah, it's basically a competition between all the ad networks for an impression that comes in.
How do I know, as an external, which company to use?
So first of all, we are in the most amazing industry that's around the world, right? Because everyone is talking to each other. Game developers, among game developers, they talk about everything. And that is really important. Share your knowledge and share your experience. Then the second part is transparency. We try to be transparent as possible, offering a ton of reports that you can just pull from the dashboard. Not everyone is that transparent. Not every network shows, for example, where you are buying. And I think you need to be really keen on that. Know in which app you're basically getting your users from. Because there's a lot of fraud going on. There's a lot of, well, you've seen the images of the mobile farms and that kind of stuff. It's a serious topic in our industry. In our case, we have our SDK in the app, which is already some sort of validation that it's yeah, proper inventory.
And are there ways for companies like Chartboost to set themselves apart from other companies? So do you focus on, like you say, transparency? Yeah. Are there certain areas that you focus of the business, and are there other companies that take a different approach, or is it all kind of the same?
Well, for us, it's mainly on mobile games, of course. There are others that are doing more demand, for example. They are more, more on branding, brand demand.
What is brand demand?
Well, let's say Coca-Cola or any other non-gaming company, basically, that they advertise for. We see that game advertisement works best in game inventory. Not saying that the brand demand is shit, but it's definitely helpful. But our publishers are really fond of having the gaming advertisement. So because they don't want to show inappropriate ads or anything.
Chartboost does mobile.
Yeah.
Is there user acquisition in the way that you do it, but for other platforms? Is there user acquisition for PC, other platforms, and what does that look like?
I think then Facebook is the best example, right? So I think there are also developers here that are non-mobile, probably being super bored by this whole conversation, but yeah, Facebook is great to show your ads to a target audience that is on the desktop only, for example. And yeah, I think there are many other ways, but for Facebook and Google, yeah, also quite important is that if you are small, let's start with Google and Facebook, because it comes with a ton of segments where you can basically tune your audience to a very narrow audience, where at Chartboost it's quite broad actually. We have gender, we have the genres and that kind of stuff. But in Facebook, for example, there's these ton of demographics that you can add to tweak your desired audience, basically.
And a small developer can do that today?
Exactly, yeah. On a small scale and basically tweak the way to get your ideal audience, yeah.
That might even be a good way to kind of get into the practice of user acquisition and learning about certain KPIs and learning about, right?
So in the beginning, on the soft launch, you're not basically buying users, you're just buying data, because that's all you want. You want the data. You want to see what is working and what is not working. So you're not really focusing on users. You just want to see, okay, what is the KPIs that we have, and how do they translate into the users that we bought. And the same goes for the landing page, and the same goes for the creatives.
different question. Mobile, you've got, of course, Google, Apple as two big platforms.
Yeah.
Are there big differences between the platform for you?
Yes. Top level, I would say that the CPI is higher on iOS. So you are, it's more competitive on iOS. Well, it's not per se more competitive, but at a higher price. Basically because the iOS users tend to spend more in your app. So there's more players that actually want, or more advertisers that basically want those type of players. Then there's also, for example, if you want to buy in China, you only can do iOS, right? So that's something to keep into account. If you have an Android game and you see good conversion, or you see good quality in China, but you cannot buy there, that's pretty difficult.
Well, talking about China, China, of course, is a huge, huge market. Do you treat foreign markets differently?
Some type of games. I work with the Russian Mail.ru guys. They work, for example, with a shoot 'em up arcade type of games, which is only basically converting in Korea and other Asian countries, but it's not working at all in US. On our platform. Maybe it's working for them in other ad networks, but for us it's not working there. We don't get the conversion and therefore the proper traction.
Does that mean that you don't even try anymore? You just make sure you just focus on the market that you know works, or do you still do experiments here and there?
We often start with a so-called run on network campaign. We just let it run worldwide, low CPIs, just to see, hey, we basically throw the spaghetti against the wall and see whatever sticks. Once again, trying to get as much data as possible, and based on that data, we basically tailor it towards a certain geo or a certain app sources, basically, and try to get as much players.
So data is king.
Yeah.
I just had a question about platforms differences and market differences. Are there also differences for very uncommon games? So games that aren't as popular or as seen as much in the store?
I think if you have a game which is very specific, not for the mainstream audience, I might not encourage to just start a normal campaign. Then I would, for example, go to Facebook and tailor that campaign, the settings, the targeting settings, basically towards that audience. But on our network, it's very broad. It's that those. If you look at the top advertisers, it's basically also the top advertisers that we see in the charts. So it's appealing to a super wide audience.
So for a game that doesn't have a lot of competitors or similarities with other games, you need to get more focused on your audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those were my questions, unless you think I've missed something.
Yeah, there's so much to say.
Well, now we're opening up the floor to questions from the incubees.
Hi, my name is Daan Kreek. Puzzles and Games is the company name. And I have a question about the Chartboost help, maybe, if you're willing to do so, for soft launch of a game. Can you help, and are you willing to help there? Because I assume it's getting more difficult for even companies like Chartboost to convince people like us to come and work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to help. We definitely want to help. There's this saying, for gamers by gamers, right? So we definitely want to help. But when the network grew over the past 7 years, we still have only a handful of account managers. A handful of account managers that are able to help, mainly focusing on the top partners, because they drive the biggest revenue for our publishers, which is needed to get more and more supply in a network. So that's why we have a self-service platform. It is our goal to give you full autonomy, to set up the campaigns, to upload the creatives, to do everything yourself, read the analytics. But there's also a great team of support guys who are willing to answer every question that you might have. So yeah, to some extent we are able to help, but we can't help everyone all the time.
Another question. So, can you tell us a bit about the most profitable creative nowadays? So, is there a specific type of creative that is most profitable?
Yeah, I already mentioned it a little bit, that playables are working well for some.
But then, the position of the playable, or does it matter?
It's a little bit depending on the type of game. For example, for casino, we still see that playable is working. You have a simple spin button and that's it. Then for hyper casual, it's relatively easy as well. It's working well because you already get a small snippet of the game. You can already play the game a little bit, get a sense of the look and feel, and kind of feel the addictive part of increasing the high score. But videos in general, from what I've seen, are the best ones right now still. Then you can play around a little bit with the end card, which can also be interactive, for example, a small givey at the end, or some lights flashing up. But the best practice for me is definitely make sure that there's no discrepancies between the creative itself and the landing page. They should be one-on-one, or completely similar, basically. If people get the feeling that the landing page is different than the creative that they clicked on, then it's likely that they will churn immediately. Also, try to set expectations in the creative, where you say, this is what you can expect. Going back to one of the casino ones, is that if you show completely wrong expectations in terms of money that they might get, you can, for example, say in a creative, hey, if you download it now, you will get 3 million coins. But if they don't get those coins, then it's likely that they will get out of the app immediately. And then you paid some money on it, and it's worthless. Then another best example is a lot of gameplay. So I don't really believe in the real human actors or the cinematic ones. Once again, with expectations, because if you use cinematics and the game looks, well, not as beautiful as it is in the video, then don't use that. Lastly, highlight some of the elements that are your selling points, such as what I see is, hey, if there's, for example, a Facebook integration that you have connections, or you can add friends to your game, make sure to highlight that as well. I would always focus on, if you look at the Bartle player types, let's look at the killer player type, the achiever, the explorer, and the socializer. Just highlight those, because it will be appealing to every type of player, basically. Maybe it's an open door, I don't know, but I think that really makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very welcome.
Hi, I'm Vincent from Grumpy Owl Games. And I was wondering if you could shed some light on the viability of still going premium on App Store, since, we've seen actually competitors being free to play going to premium, and we were thinking, right, so is it trouble getting too much acquisition cost and too low revenue, or?
So for paid, we basically don't do any user acquisition for paid apps to start with.
And why is that?
Because the conversion will be super low. If they stumble, if the user clicks on the ad and they stumble upon a paid wall, then it just doesn't back out. So we don't do that at all. But it's a great model. A small side note on that, I think also with Apple, there were some rumors on doing the streaming. So basically having a streaming possibility to pay, let's say, $5 a month, and then you can play all these premium apps. I think that is really great. But for us, there's no business model in there at this point.
Okay, but you still think it's viable?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's. I think there's some simple math to it, knowing that if they pay for this app compared to what can I get with ad monetization and in-app purchases, what is the better LTV? Is that the route one or the other one? I think if we look at the industry right now, And maybe I'm a bit biased on that. I think free-to-play is working really well. There are some great numbers that basically show how rewarding basically the free-to-play games are. But yeah, like I said, it's not really my field of expertise. I'm only focusing on free-to-play. But yeah, it could be a good way. I think it's all depending on the type of game.
Yeah, well. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you for being here. It was very interesting and I think longer than expected. So there's still a lot of things to discuss, but for now, thank you very much.